Good morning. Welcome to the June 1st Affordable Housing Advisory Committee meeting. I'm Andy Barnett, one of the co-chairs. The function of this committee is to advise the city about affordable housing policy issues and priorities for city funding. We work with the Housing Community Development Committee of the City Council to forward our recommendations to the full City Council. All committee members and staff are now participating in person. Can't read. We are streaming live over our virtual engagement hub, which is accessible through the virtual engagement hub link on the front page of the city website and also linked on the committee page. You can also watch the meeting on the city's YouTube channel, either live or recorded. You can listen to the meeting by calling 855-925-2801, then enter the code 7663. Public comment will be taken at the end of this meeting. We also accept comments by email or voicemail, but they must be made by 5 p.m. the day before the meeting. So if you didn't do that, you're out of luck for this meeting. We're going to start with a roll call. Since we have some new folks in attendance here today, I'm going to ask the committee members to just briefly, in addition to their, when I call your name, just let me know that you're here and share a little bit about your background and what brings you to this spot in our city. So, and we'll start with Scott Adams.
I'm Scott Adams. I'm an urban planner with Land of Sky Regional Council and just interested in all things housing.
Emily?
Hi, I'm Emily Axtman. I'm an architect in Asheville. My background is in affordable housing, and that's what brings me here.
How about it, David?
Hi, David Bartholomew. I'm the Program Director for Homelessness Prevention at Pisgah Legal Services.
Barry?
Hello, my name is Barry Bielek. I own the Thirsty Mountain Town and employ people who need housing, and then I have a company called Compact Cottages who tries to build housing for those people who need it.
Chris Day is not in attendance today, so Paul?
I'm Paul Heathman. Lived in Asheville since 2001 when I moved from Waynesville. I'm a mortgage loan officer at Home Trust Bank. On the board of the Home Builders Association, involved in the Realtors Association, and just interested in housing for Asheville.
All right, Tara?
I'm Tara Irby. I currently serve as the COO for Asheville Housing Authority and the ED at Brevard Housing Authority. I am a licensed real estate broker and live in Asheville, Candler area, as well as from Hendersonville, North Carolina.
Brian?
Brian Bethman. I'm just a concerned citizen interested in affordable housing.
Okay, I don't think Dewana is with us today, or Babs, so Wayna?
I am Wayna Smith. I am a community change agent. I work in the community on a grassroots level, connecting our community members to affordable housing and also advocating for those who do not have a voice.
All right, and I missed my esteemed co-chair, Margie.
Margie Bukowski. I am with Weaver Cook Construction Company. We are general contractors, and we build the most affordable housing in the state of North Carolina, and am very active in the community in helping to make decisions that will get us more housing.
And I see Antoinette Mosley, our council liaison, is here. Good to have you with us, Councilmember Mosley. So we do have a quorum. So I believe we're ready to get started. And we've got a full meeting for today. I'm excited to see us have some discussions that are really going to move some of the things that are critical to this committee's work plan for this year. Two of the big action items on our work plan for this year, one is launching the affordable housing plan. We're going to hear a little bit about that in just a minute, where that plan process is. The other is to make recommendations around some of our local incentive programs, the Luigi policy, our housing trust fund policy. And one of the things that we've talked a lot about in this committee is how we can better align local incentives with the federal resources around affordable housing that flow into this community in the terms of tenant-based rental assistance. So as we learn more about how best to align our local incentives with our federal incentives to make those recommendations, I seemed like a great time for us to hear from the Buncombe County Rental Assistance Collaborative, and Kate Pett is here from Thrive Asheville to share a little bit with us about that. So Kate, if you want to come on up, we'll hear your presentation. Did I miss something? Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Sit back down, y'all. Rookie mistake. Sorry about that. Sorry, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes from our May meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, so motion carries. And then we have an introduction to make as well. I'm so sorry.
Perfect, no problem at all.
Nikki Reed.
Nikki Reed, the Community and Economic Development Director. I'm here today to introduce you to Dennis Newbern. Dennis is our new Community Development Division Manager. So Dennis, if you'd like to come up and just share a bit about your background to this committee. Thanks.
Thank you and good morning. Again, my name is Dennis Newbern, and thank you for sharing the information about all of yourselves. I appreciated hearing. I'm going to be looking for a house soon, so maybe I'll get in touch with you, okay? And sorry for preempting you as well. Okay. I am a longtime community development practitioner, and my journey has taken me to all parts of the United States, in both urban as well as rural America, to work on affordable housing as well as other community development needs. And part of my research for applying for the job here, I took a look at several of the past videos of this committee, and I'm very, very impressed, and I was very impressed with the depth and breadth of understanding of affordable housing, as well as the passion and the desire to make it happen in this community. So now being a part of it, having the opportunity to share and to learn both ways, I'm hopeful and I'm excited about the possibilities that exist to do more and to do better, because it's most definitely needed across the United States and here in Asheville as well. So thank you. I'm available. Questions, comments, you're welcome to stop by, give me a call.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome, Dennis. Glad to have you. Now, Kate and whoever else is in this presentation, why don't you come on up and we'll get that started. Sorry about that.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kate Pett. I'm the Executive Director of Thrive Asheville. And thank you so much for having us here today. We really appreciate the strong support that the city has shown this initiative. Appreciate City Council and city staff for all they've done to really be a part of this conversation about how we can increase acceptance of federal rental assistance. And I also want to echo what our new community development manager just said, which is that I appreciate this committee and all the volunteer time that so many of you bring to this effort to create effective housing policy for our community. So thank you for that. I'm joined today by Garrett Razik, Thrive's Program Director, and Francina Edmonds, who is Thrive's Landlord Navigator and works with the Buncombe Rental Assistance Collaborative. So you'll get to hear from both of them in just a minute. I'm going to try and complete this presentation with them in about 20 minutes, and then we look forward to engaging with y'all in some Q&A. So next slide. Just some quick background on Thrive Asheville, that Thrive is focused on issues that are related to growth and change, and that through the implementation of new and more collaborative approaches, have the potential to close equity gaps. So as this slide shows, our approach is to organize the meaningful work of many nonprofits and initiatives to successfully align our outcomes and scale up impact. The housing space, like many issues in our community, has a variety of effective and long-standing nonprofits, and we're really a newbie to this space, and we honor all of the knowledge and expertise that our nonprofits and other community leaders have in this issue. But we do see that with, like the arrows going in lots of different directions, sometimes the many folks in this space can end up competing for scarce resources, and that the lack of coordination can result in competition for resources disorganization, poor communication, and sometimes prevents us from being able to effectively achieve the real scale that we need to achieve to really address the affordable housing crisis. And as you are aware, the scarcity of housing dollars, you can go to the next slide, makes the issue of voucher acceptance especially important. We can leverage as a community much more than $1 million per year in federal funding if we can capture more of this federal rental assistance. But as this slide shows, we can also close equity gaps. So this slide is thanks to data that we have been working with the Asheville Housing Authority staff, who are tremendous and great partners in this work, have helped us start to tease out who are the people who currently are holding vouchers, who could find housing if they could find landlords who would accept their vouchers, and who currently cannot find those places to live. And so you can see that this lack of federal rental assistance disproportionately impacts women, BIPOC folks, and children. Next slide. However, the challenge of ensuring greater voucher acceptance does not begin actually with landlords. As this slide shows, there's really a lot of obstacles for potential voucher holders throughout the process. What we're learning is that many people who may be eligible for vouchers, even those living in public housing developments, sometimes are not aware of their eligibility or the process to accepting vouchers or to accessing vouchers. Potential voucher holders may fail to complete the necessary steps. They might miss the notification that requires them to apply within a certain time frame or to attend a meeting or presentation or a training to access vouchers. And so they might miss their opportunity to join the queue of people with vouchers. Once they have a voucher, they may not find a property with whom they are a match within the time period allowed by their voucher, because vouchers are time limited. And finally, they must compete with other voucher holders for scarce housing opportunities where vouchers are actually accepted. Next slide. So we convened landlords to learn about why they're hesitant to accept vouchers, and I think these results aren't surprising to anybody here. They told us primarily there were 3 reasons why they were hesitant to accept vouchers. First, vouchers are less profitable when they do not keep pace with market rate. Our local housing authority has done a fantastic job trying to ensure that our voucher rates continue to as much as they can keep pace with our market rate, but we all know that our market is so difficult in this community that it's really impossible for vouchers to be able to match that voucher rate or the market rate. The other thing that landlords told us is that the process of joining the program to accept vouchers can be slow. As one property owner told me, he said, "I can advertise on Zillow tomorrow and have a great tenant. And it can take me a month to work through the process of accepting vouchers. Time is money." So finally, landlords also told us that the other sort of hesitation they have is due to both some true stories and also widespread stigma about who voucher holders are. There's a real fear about potential damage to assets and property. Next slide. So in 2020, with the financial support of the city, Thrive launched the Landlord-Tenant Partnership to assist families living in public housing communities who wanted to move to housing in new neighborhoods that better met their needs. So this program was meant to serve families who had children under the age of 16 who were living in public housing communities, who were eligible for vouchers, and who wanted to move into housing in the private market. We designed the program to address the concerns of landlords by directly providing 3 things. We offered a financial bonus for signing on to the program to increase profitability. We worked closely with landlords to assist them in navigating the system to speed up the process, and we offered damage mitigation funds. Thanks to the city, again, we were awarded $100,000 for this initiative. We still have $20,000 remaining. That's because very little of the damage mitigation funds were actually used. So in total, we spent about $80,000, and we have 20 families who are still housed, who have had no complaints. Their lease renewals are secured. So for a city investment of about $4,000 per successful family, we have families living in high-opportunity neighborhoods, and we've captured affordable housing stock because all of those properties had never before accepted vouchers. So these are 20 new affordable units, 20 families served for about $80,000 of a city investment. Additionally, there were 25 units made available in public housing as a result. So 25 families who were on the waiting list to move into public housing were able to take those spots. Also, this leveraged about $576,000 in federal funding. So that's about $1 of local funds for every $7.20 of federal funds. I feel good about these results, except for I worry about those 5 families who aren't successful. 80% means 5 families were not able to succeed in new neighborhoods and in new housing. And because these are already vulnerable families and children, me and our colleagues and our folks at the Asheville Housing Authority thought, what does that mean, and what do we need to do to really improve the success for families and ensure that this program better meets all of our goals? Next slide. We surveyed all of the tenants who participated in our program, and what we learned is that tenant education is really critical and a real gap in this community. Tenant surveys reflect a comprehensive need for navigating the entire process, from obtaining a voucher to searching for a property to moving into the property, and then most critically to actually succeeding in that new neighborhood. Housing stability is a long-term process, and that's really the goal. The goal here is not just to get a new roof over someone's head, but to actually change life outcomes by providing long-term housing stability. Poverty, of course, doesn't stop once somebody moves into a new neighborhood, and the challenges continue of job insecurity and all the other things that we know come with folks who are dealing with real deep poverty. So we need this ongoing tenant support. Next slide. So as we thought about the landlord-tenant partnership as one approach to increasing voucher acceptance, we learned that there's these other partner agencies who are also doing this really meaningful work of trying to place vulnerable populations in our community by leveraging federal rental assistance. And we reflected that there's really an unlevel playing field. Some organizations have lots of incentives that they can offer landlords. Other organizations do not have the same level of resources. Some agencies have lots of case management support, and other agencies do not have as much. So this competition intermittently increases the benefits for landlords, but over the long term, this competition among agencies for landlords adds to the unpredictable nature of the federal rental assistance ecosystem. The competition does not serve tenants because it increases the likelihood that nonprofits will place tenants with the very first landlord that becomes available and will accept their federal rental assistance. So for that reason, Thrive Asheville convened this group of housing agencies that you see here to imagine what it would look like if we all worked together to recruit landlords, support tenants, and scale up the availability of housing for voucher holders. And that is where I'm going to hand it off, because that became the Buncombe Rental Assistance Collaborative. And here's Garrett Raisin.
Hello, y'all. It's a pleasure to see you in person. I literally tune in every month, and I work closely with some of y'all. It's a pleasure to be here with and share this space. Nikki, we're good to go. And so Kate's talked a lot about this environment of competition and how this is not an environment that local organizations created themselves or wanted to be in. Rather, it was one in which I was formed for them due to the housing market that we faced, and also due to just funding cycles, the way in which funding is offered. And so they often found themselves on this left side of the spectrum that you're seeing here of competition, or maybe mere just coexistence, or sometimes cooperation through different working groups. But we want to move along this spectrum to increasingly move towards coordination and collaboration through shared goals, shared measures, and shared learning. So this vision was then born. All the partners here, and the partners are Homeward Bound, WinCap, Thrive, Asheville, Helpmate, the VA through their HUD-VASH program, and the Housing Authority. We created this vision that a high-functioning ecosystem exists in Buncombe County where federal rental assistance is utilized effectively, becomes widely accepted, and moves tenants to long-term housing stability. This is the vision that everyone came around. We all serve different populations, but we all could come together and recognize the shared need for housing and the shared opportunity to actually develop a strategy going forward. And so these are the stakeholders. So you see here is, and I'm gonna be a little more, since I tune in over the phone every now and then, I'm gonna really explain things sometimes what we're looking at for those listening. We have some funders that we see here are funding these efforts. So a lot of the grant comes from the city of Asheville, Buncombe County, but we have matching funds on the landlord incentive side from the Housing Authority, and then there's been other grants that partners have been able to secure because they've essentially explained the work that we're doing and have attracted attention. Thrive Asheville is the facilitator of this work, and you see the performers above. Again, each serving different populations. The Housing Authority serving those moving to the private rental market. Helpmate, survivors of domestic violence. Homeward Bound, those who are unhoused or at below 30% AMI. HUD-VASH, veterans. Thrive LTP, families with children who are moving to the private rental market. And WinCap, immunocompromised community members. And this is what that facilitator team looks like over at Thrive. And so it's important to point out that Thrive has its landlord-tenant partnership program that Kate explained. And so Francina, who's the landlord navigator, and Crystal, who's a tenant navigator, are both responsible for administering the Thrive landlord-tenant partnership program with those families, but they are also responsible for supporting all the other organizations on the tenant and landlord side. And so you see their different roles, and they are actually at the service of those organizations, and their goal is to support the work that other organizations do. And this is really the two lanes they find themselves in. So up the top there, you see Francina, who you're going to hear from in a moment, really working to recruit landlords, conduct property assessments, educate landlords on what does it actually mean to contribute and do your part to create a more stable housing environment for tenants. On the tenant side, really understanding tenant need, where do they need to be located, how to get a tenant ready for a successful housing experience. And then this is where things sometimes get tricky, the actual matching of those two lanes, where they come together and have a successful tenant-landlord matching, and then continuing to support throughout the housing experience for long-term housing stability. And so, what do our goals look like then for the Buncombe Rental Assistance Collaborative? Our ultimate goal is to move 150 vulnerable families and individuals, so 150 households, into safe housing in the 2 years of this grant. We're about 6 months in from the official launch of it. 26 households have been placed thus far, so we're looking at about 16 plus months to go. But it's not as simple, as Kate said, as just placing. It would be a disservice to just quickly try to get to that number and place households. Instead, what we're looking to do is actually build the infrastructure to support this work going forward. And that means having some really tough conversations, and I want to just shout out all of the Buncombe Rental Assistance Collaborative partners who have come to the table and had those tough conversations to do things like, how do we actually align on the incentives that we're offering to landlords to participate? Kate mentioned this issue of landlords need to maybe hold a property when otherwise they could go to the private rental market and maybe lease that property the next day. And so what does it look like to actually say, you know what, we're not going to compete with one another for who has money at this point in time because of this funding cycle, and is able to offer this incentive versus that one? How do we actually align on the exact dollars that we offer landlords based on different property types? Also creating shared standards. What does it look like to actually support tenants? So we notice that different organizations were doing different things to support tenants, largely due to capacity. But what do we all commit to? So committing to things like quarterly site visits for tenants, actually conducting barrier assessments at those quarterly site visits, educating tenants in particular areas and providing those opportunities like financial management, understanding your lease. Also on the landlord side, what does it look like to have shared expectations of landlords? How many days should you give tenants and these organizations to resolve any issues? What education should landlords be receiving? And so we have regular working groups, and like literally I am given like 30 minutes to lead that working group. Today we're going to talk about shared advocacy. How do we want to actually message our needs to the community? But we conduct regular meetings, monthly, whole group bunker rental census collaborative meetings, where we share best practices across different organizations. We also have shared learning. David, I want to shout you out right now, because David just led a session the other week where we had about 20 case managers across these organizations come in, and they were able to ask David questions about what does it mean to support tenants in their tenancy when it comes to tenant rights. And David was a tremendous resource. And so when you see these names here, this is actually a community effort where organizations are really stepping up to educate those who are working to address the housing crisis. Another thing we've done is we have actually built shared data, shared measures. And so we are regularly reflecting on our data. So what does it look like to make progress on goals, on tenants placed, tenants educated, or going through education sessions rather. Also repair funds that have been utilized, incentives that have been utilized, and getting more towards the outcome data as well. So eventually we're going to see data come back at what does lease renewals look like, the rates of lease renewals, other data like survey data, tenant quality of life, and how tenant quality of life has improved over their tenancy. So those surveys are going to increasingly be added to the data that we currently have. I've blocked off all the names there, so that's why you see some unusual markings. But we regularly reflect and do quarterly kind of step backs to really not just get to the end of a grant and say, okay, let's write a report and see what went well, what didn't. How do we actually, in the midst of the work, reflect on the work and improve? And so this is all the bunker rental assistance collaborative strategy. This is the upstream kind of work, but it all leads to that downstream impact. And Francina is here to share a story of the downstream impact of this work.
Good morning. Francina Edmonds, the landlord navigator at Thrive Asheville. So happy to see so many familiar faces, and thank you for all the work that you do. As Kate says, we like to move the work, and this is one success story that I'm really proud of. Both Crystal and I are tenant navigator. This is a picture of Paul and Margaret Belk Tierney, and their successful tenant partner. They joined us at the beginning of the year with both a financial interest in our incentives as well as a real calling to impact community. And I think that's really important as we're looking to recruit landlords. We want to make sure we're, of course, presenting the incentives, but when someone has a calling for collective impact, it makes it that much easier to do the work, and these landlords do. And we really pooled our shared resources here. They initially signed up for our Thrive Landlord-Tenant Partnership, and we realized early on that they were not eligible based on their location of their unit. It was outside of the city of Asheville, it was inside the county. We were able to quickly pivot with a new shared standard of service where we're actually queuing all of our partners into an equitable release of tenant and landlord matching, a release of the landlord to that partner. We were able to connect them with another one of our bunker rental assistance collaborative partners, and that tenant is now successfully housed for the last 5 months, doing really well. So much so that this particular set of landlords have agreed to now bring on a second property. Really important in our recruitment to focus on landlords who have potentially multiple properties to bring, who have that call for collective impact, and also want to make an investment in real system change, real capital into system change. So we're so thrilled to be partnering with Margaret and Paul and this particular tenant survivor. I think really it speaks to our maximum impact around our shared standard of service. When Kate talked about all those arrows pointed in different directions, it's so real. That level, watching the evolution of this competitive space now really start to transition into a team atmosphere where everyone's activating for one common goal. I'm so hopeful with what we have on our hands in terms of the need for affordable housing stock, that this really is going to be impactful, continue to be impactful. So thanks so much for letting me share. Back to you, Kate.
Can I ask you a question? Yes. These two people that were our landlords, what size properties do they have?
So these particular landlords have a variety of properties between 2 and 3 bedrooms. The need varies from partner to partner. We have some partners who really need a 1-bedroom for single individuals. So we have to be workable in terms of connecting that landlord to that partner.
I'm really talking about how many do they have? 200 units? Do they have 150
No.
units? Is it a 350 unit complex?
No,
What
no,
do
no.
they have?
Under 10 units.
Under 10?
Yes, under 10
Okay.
units.
So these are very, very small landlords?
Yes.
Very individual landlords, not any of the big complexes? Okay.
I will say that we are working with those property managers and those large multifamily as well. It's part of our recruitment strategy, and so we are at the table. It is the level of incentivization, I think, for the landlord is going to vary based on that. And we're always looking to improve and understand what that would look like as a direct response to the need.
Well, and that's one of the goals for sure of this program is to get into multifamily units because definitely, Margie, as you point out, I mean, the whole landlord-tenant partnership is really built on sort of like mom and pop landlords who had up to 10 units. And we know that really to bring this to scale, we're gonna have to engage with large-scale multifamily units. And that takes a really highly functioning system, right? If I'm a big multifamily developer, then I'm gonna need my tenants to be able to be replaced quickly. I'm gonna need a predictable environment where I know I can follow this process in this period of time, receive this level incentive. So getting to that is sort of the point of all of this, is that kind of this chaotic environment that existed before really sabotaged that goal of getting to multifamily units. So we've got just a couple more slides to go. So our recommendations at this point, one is that we're still learning. This process is relatively new. We actually started meeting regularly as collaborative for the first time in December. So we're still learning, and as Garrett said, he's leaving, we're all leaving this meeting to go to meet with all of our BRAC partners to talk about what is the advocacy agenda? What do we need as a team to really scale up this work? So please stay tuned and please invite us back in just a couple months when we can really give you some very specific recommendations. But based on what we want to know now, or where we are right now, we do have these recommendations. First, which is that you incentivize developers to create voucher set-asides, but that you do that in sizes that address equity gaps. And for this, we need to keep digging away at the data. We need to know more about who are the voucher holders, where do they live, and what kinds of needs do they have. So we need to keep pursuing the data and have this data about who voucher holders are. They're not a monolithic group. And when we think about developing units that will serve them, we're going to need to ensure that we're asking developers to develop the right kinds of units for them. We do need to invest in the long-term support of this initiative. So this collaborative impact work is really unusual. Thrive Asheville is employing these folks, but they actually are working for 5 other agencies right now. And all of the incentives that we've got are being directly shared with other agencies. So this kind of, this resource sharing reduces competition and makes this ecosystem work, but it requires support. So we are going to ask that you continue to advocate for this kind of collective impact work. Thrive operates as the backbone agency for these different groups. And whether it's Thrive or it will be in the future some other agency, that backbone is going to need ongoing support so that it can continue to organize this. Without that, we won't be able to have the predictable and profitable ecosystem that will make large-scale owners want to accept vouchers. We won't have adequate supports for tenants so that they can have long-term stability, and we won't be able to really take advantage of these federal dollars. And finally, I really see the potential for this structure ultimately to be the way in which developers are able to connect to voucher holders. I've received multiple calls from developers, sort of every time there's an article in the paper. Shortly after that, I've gotten a phone call where somebody says, so I'm being asked to include voucher holders or voucher units in my property, and I don't know anything about how to find voucher holders. What do I do? And I said, well, you can call someone at the housing authority. And they're like, well, but I need to talk to somebody today, and I need to move somebody in tomorrow, and how is that gonna happen? So we really need this type of structure so that we can have a direct connection between developers, property managers, and these local nonprofits who are serving people who have federal rental assistance. It will help the city increase accountability so the city can be sure that the voucher set-asides that people have committed to are actually filled with people who have federal rental assistance, and it will support monitoring and data collection. So we hope that you'll continue and invite us back in a couple months, and we'll tell you more about what we've learned. So I wanted to invite these guys back up to see if you guys have any questions.
So I have a question. You've got 2 years worth of funding for this project?
Mm-hmm.
What is the funding that's required to support it?
For the total between the city and the county is $500,000 over 2 years for these 150 families. And what that does is it provides all of the incentives, it provides damage mitigation, and it helps provide for the staff salaries. It doesn't completely cover all the staff salaries, but it provides fully for the landlord navigator and for the tenant navigator, who we really wish was here, but she's actually organizing the next meeting that we're going to right now. But she's really amazing, wish she was here too.
And is that what you're anticipating on an ongoing basis, would be about $250,000 a year to support it?
I think that's a really good question. I think there could be some efficiencies that might actually reduce costs. I mean, right now we have a lot of that money is damage mitigation that's like just sitting on the shelf. And my hope is that now that we're doing this great job with landlord-tenant matching and we're providing tenants with the support they need to be successful, we're actually going to reduce that number of damage mitigation. As I mentioned at the top of this presentation, when we requested $100,000 from the city, we still have $20,000 of that we're not even going to use. It's actually just going to go back to the city because it's not being claimed. So I expect and I hope that with more support, we'll see more and more of that so the cost could actually go down.
I wanted to ask how, help me understand how you all are working with the Asheville Housing Authority, which has been such a conduit to all of this. What is that process?
Yeah. So we work really, really closely with the Asheville Housing Authority staff, particularly Michelle Moore, who you know has come and represented to this group many times. You know, what we've learned is that case management at the Housing Authority means each case manager has literally hundreds of people that they are overseeing. And it's not actually, it couldn't possibly provide individualized tenant coaching and tenant education. It also, because the Housing Authority is not in a position to make specific recommendations about how a tenant would match with a property and how that would really violate their own kind of neutrality in that process, there's not really a matching process between landlords and tenants. So how do we work with them right now? Well, Francina works with Michelle. She talks with her on a weekly basis, and they discuss issues that landlords are facing. Right now, we have a damage mitigation claim. So Francina and Michelle are working on that together. And Francina, by being able to provide very individualized service to that landlord, can kind of make sure that the landlord feels good, doesn't leave the program, just provide him with that extra touches and care that will ensure that he'll stay with the program. Crystal works on the other side of it. She is working with Morgan, so she gets, as soon as voucher holders become eligible and have vouchers, she hands that list over to Crystal, our tenant navigator, and Crystal provides tenant education, supports the tenants all the way through placement and then beyond. So really working, kind of picking it up from Housing Authority staff as soon as they've kind of done all of the behind-the-scenes work of getting people to vouchers.
Sometimes it's things that seem really small that get worked through in these meetings. Things like, hey, we're noticing a lot of vouchers are expiring. Like, how do we make sure folks get notice of their vouchers about to expire? What does the system look like for reminding folks, or reminding folks who've just moved to the private market of rent being due? And maybe they had a system where there's a reminder previously, but how do we now fill in any gaps that may exist? And so working through those types of small problems that actually have real impacts.
Did I answer your question, Marty?
I have a few, I guess. What would you say is like the current ratio of tenants to landlords? So what is like, how many tenants are you trying to find placements for, and then how many landlords are you trying to match up? So what would you say that ratio is like right now?
Well, again, so just speaking from Thrive's perspective, which is one of the programs in that umbrella. So Crystal's already provided tenant education to more than 40 different households, and LTP has placed 5. So we found 5 landlords for 40 potential fits that could be. But that's just with Thrive's program. And then when we talk about other agencies.
Yeah, with other agencies, we overall 26. And I think it's important, though, we're diving into the data to understand the different types of vouchers, the different allocation of funds. I would say, based on our data, we know of 104 households out there who are seeking, and we certainly don't have that number of landlords. I think right now, if we were to look at what our BRAC partners need, Long-Term Rental Assistance Collaborative partners need, against the maybe list of 35 landlord partners, some with multiple properties, right? I think we would need more landlords to serve our community.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to understand, is how many of like the vouchers that are available that then how many are you actually taking through the tenant training that then are kind of ready, and then there's just not units for? So you said you have 40 families that you've taken through your tenant program, and
And that's, again, just in our agency. So you could look at like a Homeward Bound, for instance, which has many more folks than that they're trying to place right now. 70 that they're trying to place, thank you. So that's just a slice, that's just the slice from HACA.
Another question on, so we always talk a lot about data. We wish we had the data. And for so many things, and then it's so much work to get all that. Who does that? I find so many times we talk about, we wish we had the data. We wish we know where this is. And we're like, who does that? Is that something that grants get put out towards? Because I just find so many things, we say, we wish we had the data. I wish we knew how many bedroom units, are needed, how many vouchers, who does that, and how do we empower them more?
Well, it does take a lot of time, and Garrett spends a lot of time doing that, and actually I've spent a lot of time with our community coordinator, Kelly Golden, on working on collecting that data too. But Michelle Moore is the key point person at the Housing Authority who collects data, and she and I have worked through that data. And I think it's not just about how do you get the data, but then what questions do you ask with the data? I feel like we look at the Bowen report and it's really driven so many conversations about affordable housing, and it's driven by the number of units that we need, but not by the number of people who need to be served. And that's the question I want to get to, because children aren't voucher holders, but they should count as people who need affordable housing. And so we really need to ask better questions of the data. And that is part of Thrive's work in this project, and it's part of the work that we'll continue to do. And again, I just have to lift up Michelle and the rest of the Housing Authority team who've been so great at continuing to unpack the data with us, and we're just working with them on it. And Garrett is doing a great job, I think, collecting then the results, and within 6 months or so, we'll be able to start to see things like, well, who are the people? What do the families and the households look like that we were able to place? And who weren't we able to place? Who is continuing to face barriers that can't find housing with federal rental assistance, even after they've completed tenant readiness education? And what do they say on surveys, 6-month post-placement surveys? Is their life changed? What barriers are they continuing to face? So we're continuing to survey tenants, continuing to talk to landlords, and we'll be bringing all of that to you. But yeah, it's a lot of work.
Yeah. That's what I'm just saying, because as one of the goals of trying to provide that for when funds are set aside for how to encourage new developments, like as new developments are coming for either funding or construction, to tell them how it's really clear, like this is what the need is, and it's like there's this many bedroom, this many people are ready with 3 bedrooms, or this many are ready with 2 bedrooms, because that will help us to guide for especially for set-asides, and then even for developers for projects that are coming in. If when on the front end, if they say, hey, it's not just I'm setting aside X many vouchers, it's like I need this 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms, and so that's something so you guys kind of consolidate that from Housing Authority.
And our other partners as well.
Okay, and then I do hear your point that we also again talk about data, but data such as broad view that this it's so individual. Like it was kind of hitting home. I read that the article that was just out about HIAC and housing, about homeless, and that how we kind of track it as numbers in other communities, literally tracked by the person. Because I imagine here with the voucher placements, it's so individualized.
Yeah.
One last question about moving, like the one thing, like our experience when we had a project that was trying to work with the partnership was that the voucher, as we've talked about, had to come from project-based housing. Is there any talk or way how that can expand? Because it would be a lot more flexible, because it definitely limits who your landlords are available, I think, and
yeah, there's just a huge need. And so right now, because we have one tenant navigator, we are focused on helping the specific populations served by these nonprofits. And so, we can't at this point expand to helping other voucher holders who might seek to move. And we do get calls all the time. Frequently, they're from people who already live in the community and already have a voucher that helps them live in the community and can't find another place to go. But for some reason, that housing is substandard or it's unsafe. And we just simply don't have the capacity to help that group as well. And it's a really important issue. But our group right now is not just working just with people moving with public housing, because we're working with all these partners as well.
thank you.
You mentioned in a comment that you would like to see developers needed to build specifically for this population. Can you help me understand what you were looking for in that comment?
Well, what I mean is that I think that's part of the continuing to get the data, and to get the data in a new way and not be driven by just kind of the number of units at this really high level, but to dig down into understanding what do households look like that are experiencing this really deep poverty. And that requires, really, it requires working closely with nonprofits to understand what their populations look like. It requires working with the Housing Authority staff to ask them what those households look like. I mean, that slide that I presented that showed how disproportionately this is impacting BIPOC folks, women and families, children, that's data that we haven't really talked about before, that this group of people who need houses, we can see that it's very disproportionately impacting this kind of community, this kind of population. So I don't have a complete answer to your question right now. It's something that we'll have better information for you in 4 or 6 months, something like that.
So another thing that I think would be great for you guys when you're looking for data is school-age children. If you can ask, because we know that instability in the home deeply affects how well children do in school. And so if you start out, we have these successful stories, is there any way to ask, have their grades improved? Is their behavior improving because they have a stable home now? I know that's a very personal thing to ask a parent, but something that, you know, could really be great data is to say their grades did improve, their behavior improved, because they have a stable home. So,
yeah, completely, Margie, totally agree with you. And that was really the reasoning behind starting with families living in public housing, was because we know that children's life outcomes are so much better when they're living in a mixed income community. And we know that these pockets of deep concentrated poverty really mean that children will have less opportunity to experience social mobility. That goes back to Barry's question about data, though. Collecting that kind of longitudinal data is really expensive and really hard. It would be worth doing, but again, that would have to be a community investment that said, we want to know what the results are of this 5 years on, and Thrive or some other person, other entity, would really need community support to track down that data. But it's really important.
So I have a point that we have many wealthy people in this community. We have many, many wealthy people and wealthy corporations. And I'm thinking that it would be great. I mean, you all would have to frame it up nice and pretty, but there's a way to take it to some of these people and corporations and say, we need your help to fund this type of study. And I can't imagine them saying no. I really just can't imagine some of those people saying no. We have, we don't have a lot of big corporations, but we do have a few. And I would think that they would be willing to fork out $50,000, which would be nothing to them, to do something like this. I just pulled that number out of the air. I have no idea what it costs.
I'll give you a call.
So, the city, through different programs over the years, has created a lot of affordable housing units. Therefore, there are a lot of landlords. Do we have any idea how many of those landlords that have accepted bond, housing trust fund, Luigi money are actually in this program?
What a great question. So we know that monitoring is something that the city's really increasing their capacity. And so I actually can't answer that question right now. A lot of the previous funding that the city has allocated has gone to multifamily units, and we haven't really cracked that market yet. So I think that great idea and great reason why we should support this structure. So going forward, we would have great answers to that, because there would be this kind of data keeper that would help with the accountability and monitoring for developers.
Right, because in our contracts with the rental landlords that have received the city funding, it requires they make a good faith effort to accept vouchers. It seems to me the city could make a policy amendment to say good faith means they're part of this program.
Yeah.
And if you're not doing that, like Sasha reported 2 meetings ago, we had one Luigi landlord that had 35 units of housing that were affordable, but none of them had voucher holders in it. And so to me, this is an easy fix to say, if you're not part of that program, this program, you haven't made a good faith effort. Ergo, you don't get your Luigi money.
That's what we meant. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. But anyway, so I just think that's a key thing the city could do quickly, to say defining good faith effort means participation in this program. Because otherwise, prima facie, these people haven't done it.
That'd be great.
And also, some of the things that Francina and others are increasingly discovering, you saw that funnel of like those who initially may be eligible for vouchers and how that number decreases due to a number of obstacles. Even those types of developments that say, hey, we accept that vouchers, you're increasingly seeing that they might say, voucher holders with credit scores over 600, voucher holders where the agency pays the full amount. There's not there's not anything owed by the actual, so we don't have to manage a different like payment. And so there's other stipulations that enter, and Francina and others are increasingly trying to navigate that and actually educate in the way in which that negatively impacts.
But I think that's important data for you to feed back to us is what are the criteria that are filtering people out so that as we create language going forward in REACH or other policies, that we can try to remove some of these barriers so that people can't make restrictions on credit scores of 800 or more in order to qualify for a rental unit if you've got a voucher. And de facto just not accept vouchers then. Again, to sort of go through and define this language about what is good faith effort. One other quick question. So I know Just Economics is working on a common tenant application. Is that part of what you guys are doing as well?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah, so the centralized rental application, it would be beneficial for both landlords and especially tenants to be able to see a volume of properties, also to input any sort of background information that may or may not be favorable. Just really, I think for us, the way that our partners framework for working today will work within that framework. But we will also be sharing this opportunity with landlords consistently so that we can build up that database. We know who they are, and tenants have a quick and swift connection to them. So yeah, we're huge advocates for the CRA. We presented it at our last landlord community impact event. Our landlords are really excited about it so that they can actually see those tenants even beyond our programs who may be needing affordable housing.
I just wanted to, just really quickly, it occurred to me, could you go to the presentation just for a quick sec? I'm sorry. And could you go to slide 15? I wanted to say specifically while we have the opportunity about what we've had to do to get there on each of these things, because I just think it provides some clarity. So in terms of the aligned incentives, there were organizations offering incentives, everything from like $3,000 per unit down to like $500 a unit, upfit incentives, damage incentives. I mean, it was all over the map. And all of our collaborative partners now are offering incentives based on the quality and the need for a specific property. And they're either at $1,000 or $2,000. So we've really tried to simplify that whole system so that we're reducing competition, but also making it easier for landlords to understand. I want to say something about how critical these shared standards of service are. As Garrett mentioned previously, some tenants were getting this level of service and other tenants were getting this level of service. And that was based on the capacity of organization. It wasn't because anybody was slacking or not doing their best. But we've agreed, and so now we can say to our landlords, your tenant will get at least a quarterly visit. Your unit is going to be visited, and we're going to be able to catch problems early so that we can be ensured that we're going to reduce that damage mitigation challenge. And also, tenants are going to be more successful. And we're also doing that on the landlord side, as we said, so that landlords, we really know what we're investing in. When we give landlords extra incentives, they also have to give us an extra opportunity to make it work for tenants. So I just wanted to provide some specifics because this really is the meat of the work, is making these things align and getting organizations to agree to the same things. It is not easy, but it really is what is going to make this work over the long term.
Any other questions for Kate? We hadn't heard from this side of the room, so I'm looking at y'all.
I would just say that I work with this group and I love you. I watch the progress. I love Francina. I love Kate. Brent, we've been in meetings together and I didn't know who he was. And I'm just so excited to see all this. This is everything I've been saying for the last couple months, and I'm excited for our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda.
Yeah, really appreciate you.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thanks so much. We'd love to come back with the data that you requested and keep giving you more.
6 months, right?
6 months.
We'll put you on the calendar, six months out. gives us a lot to think about as we start to dig into aligning Luigi and Housing Trust Fund to better leverage federal dollars that flow into our community. So appreciate everybody's good questions on all of that. And now switching gears to our other big work plan task for the year, launching a new affordable housing plan. That's a key piece of what this committee is here to do, and we're excited that we're getting closer to getting that started. So, Nikki, tell us where we are and how we got here.
Sure thing. And I'm standing in for Sasha today. As you know, she's at the Center for New Urbanism convening that's happening in Charlotte. There's a city cohort that has gone down to participate in that exciting work, and so I'll be standing in for her. So an update about the affordable housing plan. So key takeaways, we certainly want to have clear direction on our affordable housing programs and funding. Really, I think of this plan as the strategic plan for staff, our work plan, really, how do we continue to advance our efforts to meet the needs of our community? The existing housing plan dates back to 2008. I think this committee knows that well, and so we want to recognize there's some changes that have happened in the marketplace since then. We want to make sure that our tools are right-sized. So it's also an opportunity to engage the community in a comprehensive and coordinated way to help determine the future of Asheville's housing programming. I'm really excited about the fact that the plan will assist the city in leveraging its affordable housing tools. I think this committee really does do a lot of deep dives on how these tools have impact, and so we want to make sure that we have the appropriate tools and that Asheville is really leading the way in affordable housing. This planning process, we've kind of timed it to really start with the new fiscal year, and then it will be hopefully used to inform a potential future affordable housing bond. And so I'm excited about that potential and really gearing up to meet that. So a little bit of background about the affordable housing plan. Again, the most recent plan was created in 2008. We've set aside a budget of $97,000 of the city's funds to really complete this plan update. And then we've also asked the Dogwood Health Trust to contribute funding for additional efforts. And so I think we will find out that decision later in June or early July. I think that's the timeline to understand the Dogwood Health Trust funding. And really, this work of this committee, as well as Thrive Asheville, I think will further inform the work of this plan. And it's really good timing to really understand where Thrive is bringing this new partnership to the table, and then just really seeing how the data piece is threaded throughout. There's a data component of the plan, so I'm excited to really further understand, once we have a consultant on board, how we use that and continue the conversation there. So really, I think it will assess our current needs and set this direction for the next 5 to 10 years of how we leverage our tools. We certainly want to involve residents affected by the housing crisis and really address community priorities. We want to look at our current policies and really address any gaps in our housing toolbox. We really want to dig into our land use incentive grant, housing trust fund, and our policy around developing affordable housing on city-owned land. So those are really our major city-controlled funding tools where we can have impact to really drive that strategy. So again, providing that foundation and guidance on how we could potentially utilize an affordable housing bond referendum. Schedule, so this RFP was released on May 15th, and there's been some process associated with that, a pre-proposal meeting, deadline for any questions from potential bidders. I think those answers were posted, will be posted just yesterday, in fact, and then submissions are due June 12th. So we're really just lining this up. That selection process will happen between June 20th and the 14th, and then we hope to bring that to council at the end of July and kickstart on August 1st. And again, knowing our outcome of the Dogwood grant will really help us determine the level of service that we're able to have with this consultant study. And so Sasha is really leading the team. We will have support internally from our department in the Community Economic Development Group, as well as City Manager's Office, the Finance Department. Planning will certainly be a great partner in this, as well as Equity and Inclusion. Really wanting to leverage, too, our internal Office of Data and Performance to really round out our internal staff support team to further this work. And so here's our key takeaways again. And so really, I'm excited because just reflecting on the impact that, for example, the work that the National Alliance to End Homelessness had, really, I think our vision for our department is if each of our focus areas can be really informed by strong planning and strong strategic direction, that's really how I hope to shape the work of our department. So I feel like we have had good progress with the work that the National Alliance has done with our homeless strategy and really ending homelessness in our community. And really, launching that effort through systems work. And again, I hear that theme with what Kate mentioned earlier, having this plan also speak to that systems work as well, and looking at that continuum of housing and how we address those gaps, really work as a collaborative, and see that moving forward. So that's my hope with this plan, is that we can have the opportunity to really sharpen our city tools and how they fit within this housing system. So that's my update. Any questions, I'm happy to answer. I know Sasha's the brain trust here, but I'm happy to take any questions if you have them.
I think some of us were supposed to be on a committee to help look and review the people that came in.
Fantastic.
So I think that's what
Yeah.
told us.
Absolutely. So I suspect once that we receive those submittals, then you'll be contacted to participate on that. So we appreciate that partnership with this group.
Do you know how many people have submitted the RFP?
I don't, I think, I expect folks are working hard to meet that submission deadline of the 12th. I'm uncertain as to how many people may have attended the pre-proposal meeting, but I'm hopeful. I know Sasha has certainly reached out, done that research on other cities that have completed plans, so made certain to reach out to those firms to really have a robust selection. So fingers crossed.
I'm just curious, was there like any discussion about like combining it with a Buncombe County-wide needs, like RFP, just because, again, this idea, it's like it feels so fractured, like, because Buncombe's working hard on stuff, and here we're saying we need to figure out what to work hard, but the needs are the same, and it feels like it could have been to get the funding even bigger for it being a regional-wide one.
And perhaps that's where we see things going in the future. I mean, I know, so we're having a joint staff meeting with Buncombe County and their affordable housing team this month. That partnership with Buncombe County continues to grow. And so I hope we can continue working on that. I mean, I think with the passage of their bond, now looking at a city future bond initiative, I mean, there's other communities that really do collaborate on bond funding that's available. I think in our last Housing Trust Fund cycle, we've noted that having closer collaboration between funders is necessary. And so I'm curious how this plan may inform implementation strategies around that. So more to come, but I certainly hear that and agree that having collaboration with the county and region-wide with other funders is really helpful.
That regional perspective was a comment that we gave to Sasha when we were looking at the RFP for the, so, we definitely are looking for, included in the RFP, and we'll be looking in the scoring for someone who has a regional lens, a commute shed lens when they're thinking about this plan, even if it's not a plan addressing, housing for the whole region, and that it fits in with the work that Land of Sky Regional Council is doing on affordable housing in Buncombe County and others. I hear you. We're a small piece in a multi-county housing market, so.
I wonder if the housing consortium, is it ever, because it almost seems like, I just think back, boy, that would have been the great one to lead this RFP, and then the funding come from city, funding come from county. So it's not, because even like our Bowen reports have been kind of fractured. We've had a Buncombe, sometimes we've had wider reach, sometimes smaller reach, and since this is such an important piece that we're updating, and I wonder how the county's doing it, because the county has the bond money, the county has hired a whole bunch of planners, and
They've got DFR.
Yeah, how to,
they've hired
Right.
consultants that come in and
Yeah.
do all this stuff, and so, I think if I live here, so you're going like, I live in the city and I'm contributing to the city, the money for taxes, but I also am part of the county and I'm paying taxes there too, so as a, person that lives in this area, you're actually trying to help fund two different things, and it could be together.
I certainly hear that. I mean, I'm hopeful that, I mean, what I hope we achieve out of this is really understanding our, again, how to improve Housing Trust Fund and improve Land Use Incentive Grant, which are very city-centric, as well as looking at our city land opportunities. And so those are tools in our toolbox. At the same time, there's lessons we can learn from each other, and policies that benefit the system-wide. So while I think there is some benefit to having that exclusive focus on city tools, because that's what we've got to wrap our arms around and direct primarily, I certainly see that comment around regional collaboration. I will say that, you know, Dennis and I have already been thinking about the future of the home consortium, for example, and so that is really driven by a 5-year consolidated plan. And so that is going to be coming up shortly. I think 2025 is the end date of that consolidated plan. And now what that does is looks at the home region, the home footprint, right? So that's Madison, Transylvania, Henderson, Buncombe, right? So again, that initiative will kind of come on the heels of this. We're going to just start seeing how these start to knit together to really help inform a region-wide strategy.
So last week I was at the North Carolina Community Development Association conference in Hickory, and Hickory is probably almost like a star amongst the area. They're doing great things there, but there are other communities that were there that are doing some terrific things. So I highly encourage, whenever staff has time, to benchmark or look at some of the communities that are not close to us, but that are further away from us, because there are communities that are doing very great things. So.
That's another hope that I have that can be an outcome of this, is really understand, again, what tools are we missing? What are other ideas that we need to explore? How are things going? I mean, I was looking at, I think it was either Greensboro, one of the recommendations was to start a community land trust. Well, we have one here. What is there a need to invest more in those kinds of tools? I mean, that's really where I think we need that temperature check, where in terms of how are our tools functioning, how are things going, and where do we need to attend focus next?
And Margie, that's a great, you've given me a good segue to remind folks that in our packet this month, Sasha included a number of examples of housing plans from around the state. And I think it's a really, for those of you like me who are kind of visual, tactile learners we talk about an affordable housing plan. It's kind of nice to see, what that might look like. So if you haven't had a chance to take a look at those, I'd spend some time with that to help us get familiar with what the output of this process might look like and some of the other things. And Nikki, I had a question. You've mentioned how our existing programs feed into the plan and the potential for for bonding to support ideas that come out of this planning process. I know through the Missing Middle project, we're looking at other tools that the city has around zoning that could make land more affordable for housing development. I'm also thinking about, I'd be interested in knowing what else comes into this as a tool, and particularly how does this plan inform the consolidated plan that drives our CDBG and home investments, so those federal dollars that flow into the community. Is there a linkage there? Is that,
I don't know. I mean, I'll be curious to understand what kind of input that we have from the consultants that we hire to really help us manage this, in terms of, yes, are we missing out on leverage opportunities, thinking about too the vouchers, so I'm not sure exactly how that will all factor in, but I think at the same time, knowing where we are in our voucher conversation, I think being able to leverage dollars is what I'm kind of leaning on when thinking about how to knit these opportunities together.
I'm also curious around the thoughts about how the work on developing this affordable housing plan is informed by the work that the reparations committee is doing around that particularly the housing team working with the reparations committee.
It's certainly referenced in our RFP to acknowledge that we have that work ongoing, and there, of course, when we're talking about city land as well, there's some direct connections there with what the Reparations Commission is talking about in terms of land assets that were came to the city through urban renewal, and what the future of that would be. And so it's highlighted in the RFP as something to understand as we proceed. Great.
Any other questions for Nikki? Thank you so much
Thanks.
for jumping in for Sasha on all of that.
Are you going to do any kind of update, or are you just going to let us do it?
I think there's some materials that Sasha had included. Happy to answer any questions, but I know we have some action items that are coming forward with 319 and other projects. And so, but happy to answer any questions in those written ups.
319, because that really needs to, the sooner it gets started, the sooner we can get some more affordable housing.
Absolutely. I mean, I know the entitlement process is underway, and so that's something that our planning department is really leading right now. And so in terms of getting, I think what I saw was at the end of June was when it's expected to go to council for consideration for the entitlements. So that would be a major milestone then in the next steps. But I know there's lots of conversations. I did see, however, so another city-owned land, this was way back in the day, but on Broadway, if you recall, the city sold land for a mixed use, but included affordable housing units, and I saw they've broken ground. So that was nice to see. That's been a long time coming, but it's great to see that mixed income project that will include units that are deed restricted for 60% area median income. It will include those units. So glad to see that.
Any other updates that we'd like to share? Anything from our representatives on the missing middle study?
Yeah, I was just taking a brief look at the consultant's presentation. Trying to remember when they were last here, but the rough schedule, to my understanding, is that July they'll be coming back to meet with the working group and basically presenting an overview of what they've found to be potential barriers and challenges to missing middle housing. August, they're looking to have a draft report. In September, ideally looking to have a final study completed. So we'll check in on that as it progresses.
Scott, when in that time sequence would it make sense to have them
check in here? Yeah, I'd have to check with the city staff on what the schedule for that was. I know that I guess in the overview that the working group got, they were meeting, there was a mention of meeting with stakeholders, and I would assume AHAC would be on that list. I'd have to double check on that, but there was, yeah, I know they're meeting independently with, either builders or, different groups, but I'd have to check on stakeholder engagement in terms of AHAC.
Yeah, I was thinking more in terms of sort of a preliminary report out to us before they, issue maybe in that August, September timeframe before they finalize their recommendations.
Yeah. What I've heard on it, because I've been on two of the stakeholder meetings, the affordable housing one and the developer one last week, and then I asked Vidila specifically, okay, well, what's just timelines, just to understand. So what he explained is that the reports from the missing middle study are going to come probably in the fall. From that, staff is thinking that then it's going to take them the time to assess, to make the recommendations. They're thinking that they're not going to have, the staff's recommendations for any kind of changes is not going to be till the summer of next year. So I wanted to really understand the timeline, just to know, okay, how rapid is this going to happen? So what I was explained is that once the report comes back, in the fall or winter, then the staff's going to take several months, and it would probably be the summer when things start to happen.
In terms of potential text or map amendments regarding the UDO.
Yeah. And we launched, we'll share one update, because it's going to be public. We, meaning my company, actually launched two specific UDO text amendments this past week that are missing middle, and we're gonna lead the efforts for bringing them through planning and zoning and the city council. One was a flag lot amendment, which would adjust flags to open up about thousands of more lots by making it easier, and the other is a cottage development, which we've led before, to reduce the minimum size from 5 to 2. So we've launched two very targeted UDO text amendments that will lead the efforts of them. That was kind of, hoping, like, it's something that could come through the missing middle study, but if it's gonna wait till summer, it's too long.
For those that might not know what that means, might tell them why the text amendment coming from you is so important.
So that a text amendment to the UDO is something that any citizen can suggest. You put together specific wording. So you basically go through the UDO, you recommend technical changes to it. You pay the permit fee, so I paid a permit fee of $800-something per amendment. And then it basically has to be heard. It's almost like because Asheville's a complaint-based city. So if you basically make a complaint about the UDO and you make a very specific recommendation how to adjust it, it at least has to be considered. So we've been assigned a planner, and we should technically, and it's a pretty rapid thing. It's what the city process uses for making changes. So like the city, it was kind of brought to light, the city just changed their own open space amendment without any fanfare by keeping it very targeted text amendment. And it just kind of snuck through without anyone knowing it, which is good, I guess. So we're taking this, and I've done this. We've done this before, like with the cottage amendment. We led a change from it years ago. The most recent UDO text amendment, it's not a tool used very often. The most recent one that's been in the news is the cat cafes. So it was a private suggestion to change the zoning to allow cat cafes on Haywood Road in downtown. So that's why we now have 2 cat cafes in town. One on Haywood Road, one downtown, specifically thanks to the text amendment process. So, yes, and now, so motivated by the cats, we've submitted some that might help with affordable housing.
So Barry, what's the process is that you submit that and it's reviewed by a planner? Mm-hmm. And that's a decision's made
it's
and it's over?
Reviewed by a planner as reviewed by planning. Planning, just like anything, staff can make a report to recommend or deny or adjust. And then it takes, obviously, this stuff takes lobbying and garnering support. And then, but it goes to planning and zoning, whether it's got a positive staff recommendation or not positive staff recommendation.
Is that something we can review and make a recommendation on?
Possibly. Yeah, it's like it may come to next meeting. Like I had to convince them to accept my application, and they did, but it took a lot of back, negotiating. But yes, it could come in theory to our July meeting. Yeah.
Cool.
Great. Anything from the Build or Connect teams? I know both teams are working on our work plan item around recommendations for Luigi and Housing Trust Fund. So any news?
What we're doing on the Build Committee, what we walked away, an action item was to get in touch with developers, that we each all kind of work with certain developers and to ask them, to have them come to our meeting and our next meeting, have a couple, and talk to them about what they see as obstacles for them to continue to build. So it may take us a couple of meetings to get, multiple developers. I need to get with my group and find out what dates or who and all that kind of stuff. So, but that was one of our action items that we were going to do.
Millie, you want to talk about Connect?
Yeah, sure.
Leading the charge on that, it seems like
So
right
we've
now.
been working on an action plan to get community involvement and feedback about the Housing Trust Fund and Luigi. We're getting really close to actually reaching out to the community. So Garrett from Thrive has been helping with a stakeholder list that includes over 80 local organizations that we feel like could give some solid feedback because of their intimate knowledge of our Asheville community. Let's see, so I think next week we'll be reaching out via email, and then hopefully at the end of June have an in-person meeting with 12 of those 80 organizations to get some real-time feedback. We'll gather that data and then come back to AHAC and present, and hopefully that will get integrated into future revisions, or just start the conversation what's important to the community.
Yeah, and so for folks who aren't involved in one or the other of the two work groups, or who maybe haven't heard this in a while, the idea with these two parallel projects is to really, as we look at Luigi and Housing Trust Fund, particularly in the scoring criteria, to make sure that we are weighting projects or scoring projects that maximize the what the community is looking for out of affordable housing projects without creating barriers to development so that we get no housing developments actually built, right? So we want to make sure that perfect doesn't become the enemy of the done, but at the same time we want to make sure that the community is getting value out of the affordable housing investment that it's making. So that's these two parallel tracks that eventually are going to have to merge together as we put our final recommendations to HCD for these two policy changes. So I appreciate all the work that the task forces are doing on that. And if you're not on a task force, you're missing the real fun. All right. Any other CED updates? We talked about 319 Biltmore. We did present the recommendations that came out of this committee to HCD last month around the micro-unit policy. Those were rolled into the staff report, which was approved by HCD. So that all of that good discussion did move on up the line. Anything else on for CD updates?
Nikki, can you just share? So you said there's been some welcome Dennis. Can you explain what because I'm always fuzzy. What does the role mean? Like division director, what is his role? And then you said someone else has left.
So yeah, I'll share a little bit because I'm thinking about when I started as director back in the day, November 2021, so almost 2 years now. So one of our big shifts when I took the position was to really look at shifting from just community development, economic development, really into 4 focus areas. And the intent there was also to just streamline this so that we can focus our efforts. The community development role really focuses on our federal funding programs. And so they are governed by our relationship with HUD, CDBG and HOME. HOME is the consortium, so there's that group that must be managed by that staff team. So a lot goes into ensuring good policies and procedures and financial reporting and the fiduciary obligation that we have to HUD to ensure proper management of those programs. That's where we see Dennis. So Dennis is going to lead that team. And we have a couple vacancies on that team, but Dennis will now be building that out. And so all told, that is a 7-member team. And so that also includes a home ARP position. So this is an update too. Our home ARP allocation plan was approved by HUD. I don't know if we've formally announced that to this group here, but that is another source of federal funding that the Home Consortium determined to invest in affordable housing, actually, as well as supportive services. So there was a number of buckets, as we say, that the feds had really designed for potential investments, with the Home Consortium then making the necessary plan for that. So we're now working on how to implement that. So Dennis is going to be leading that charge as well on looking at how we then implement the investments in housing and in supportive services. I think we're looking at a July timeframe for potentially reconvening Home Consortium. So that is the community development division. So, and then we broke off any city tools. This is again why I make that distinction earlier with how the plan really focuses on city tools, because really it's separate and distinct from federal funding, and yet they overlap and can be used in conjunction together, and lots of opportunities for leverage. And yet we have to really strictly define those policies with our city council on how they're rolled out into community. And so Sasha leads that charge. We have had a new vacancy with our affordable housing specialist, and so we're going to be posting that as soon as possible. But yes, there's turnover in that role, but it is a newly created division that really is finding its footing. And again, my hope too is that this plan will help streamline the vision for that division going forward. Homeless strategy led by Emily Ball, fully staffed in that team now, because we had a new staff member that was approved by council last fiscal year. That team is now fully staffed. It also includes a staff member paid for through opioid planning money from Dogwood Health Trust. So there's a lot of work in that group to really focus on our continuum of care. And so again, with the work that the National Alliance to End Homelessness have produced for the city, county, and Dogwood, and really our region, to really help formulate how that group functions. Again, continuum of care used to be under community development. So really breaking that out and giving it distinct focus really allows us to ensure we have significant resources to devote to that. Then the last piece is our economic development group. So that's where we find our business inclusion manager. So we're in interviews for that position right now. Our real estate manager, we've had a retirement out of that position, but we're hopefully close in on that one. And as well as our economic development specialist, Rachel Taylor, and our CALA program leader. And so our CALA program leader has now taken a position in Charlotte, a promotional opportunity. So I think the theme with our team is that we have great staff that are also on their career journeys, right, who are taking the next step. And so Alex Mitchner ran our CALA program for 3 years, and so she's actually starting her new job today. She just had her last day yesterday. And so, I constantly as director want to ensure that staff, it's natural that, people are wanting to grow their careers. And I think the city of Asheville provides a bevy of amazing projects to work on, so I can only imagine how your resume could really shine when you think about all the different opportunities that our staff has to stretch and grow in our division. At the same time, we want to devote to our work and ensure that we have good management of our work. The other thing I wanted to mention that's important for me is just proper tools for staff. So I am happy that after a long waiting time, we are now, and Thana Alley is actually managing this project, is developing new grants management software. So that will really help us be more efficient. So again, I'm constantly looking at how we improve our systems. And so we've partnered with Neighborly. That was a request for proposals process. And that software will really help us manage our CDBG. I look at Andy as potentially the end user of that, at some point, and others, but looking at how we utilize a software to improve grants management interface with our application processes. So we're going to be rolling that out with our CDBG and Home First, and then moving on to Housing Trust Fund. So a lot going on, but really I'm hopeful that that we're just continuing to improve the department, all told. So happy to answer any questions. We're busy, but we're hanging in there. So thanks.
Can you make sure that the position for the affordable housing specialist, can you make sure that circulates amongst us quick so we have the opportunity to maybe circulate within our community?
Yes, I appreciate that, Barry. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So that moves us on to our monthly housing data, and unless I read things wrong, the data that was in our packet this month was the same data as was in our packet last month, so I don't know if that just got missed, but...
They have, I provided, we all provided updated, so maybe...
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, so that is fine. We will, as we did last month, the housing data is bad. Yeah.
Maybe it's a lie.
It could all turn around, but we don't need to belabor that point.
The biggest takeaway I'll share, I keep getting, talking about housing, housing available at certain prices, it's not changing. But the land has been the biggest. That's why I've started including this land report, because there literally is not on the MLS right now, there's not a building lot that you can purchase for $100,000 in the city to just pull a building permit on. That's never, ever, ever. So that was kind of the, why we took some action with this UDO change to try to help. We can't wait a year. Yeah.
I'll also just make a quick note. I had looked through, and one interesting trend that I see is a lot of new construction, at least price per square foot, is actually often significantly more affordable than the used housing market. I was looking at 70 Shiloh Road, built 2016, $273 a square foot for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. That's $370,000, 1,300 square feet. You look at 25 Aura Street, built 1919, 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 375, 871 square feet, so that's 430 a square foot. So very often, I've experienced this somewhat, personally, just having just decided to, instead of looking on the used housing market, as I call it, the existing housing market, just build new. So that can often be the argument, I think, for, we're always looking at, or I think all of us are looking at the overall supply, and certainly, existing naturally affordable housing is great, but oftentimes, even if something is really either old or in need of a lot of repairs, building new can sometimes, get you to a cheaper price per square foot.
Well, and Scott, that's something, I was looking at some Federal Reserve data nationally, looking at the national housing deficit that we're in, the deficit in number of units, and one of the conclusions of that study is just what you're saying, that filtering that process where older housing stock becomes more affordable has stopped happening in many areas around the country because of the severe deficit in supply. So you do see those older properties that should be coming down in value, creating that naturally occurring affordable housing. It's just not there.
Yeah.
In the homeownership market, at least. So.
If the only used car on the lot is an '83 Chevelle with a broken axle, it's going to be expensive.
Right. Yes. And that is the perfect metaphor for the national housing supply. So.
So Nikki, I have a question. Last year we said we passed a thing that said if there are buildings that have landlords can, as their apartments become empty, they can make them affordable as time goes on. And I haven't heard anything about any of that actually happening. And I wonder if that's something we need to broadcast in some way so that more people know about it.
This was part of our land use incentive grant, right? So looking at when we have larger apartment built, I think the idea, as an example, would be that when a larger existing apartment building was purchased, changed hands, needed renovations, et cetera, rather than seeing those rents, that renovation occur and then rents increase, being able to use a land use incentive grant to convert some of those to affordable. To my knowledge, we have not had any applicants in that.
I don't think people know about it. I don't think it's widely known, maybe I should say it that way, but I wonder if that's not something that, I don't know, maybe we can just get volunteers to try to help get it out there so that it is something that, there certainly are a lot of older apartment buildings in the city that I'm sure need rehabilitation, and that this could be a way of getting some more affordable apartments.
That's maybe a partnership with development services who are going to see those, apartment renovation projects coming through.
And but I just don't think it really got a lot of publicity, and we need to get it out there somehow. I'm not sure I have the right method for that. But.
Yeah. Again, curious about the housing plan, how that will, whether that's a viable tool, or if it's really just that we need to improve the messaging. Yeah.
All right. So a couple of topics for us to be thinking about as we wrap up today. There will be 2 vacancies on AHAC in September, and those openings are currently posted. So if you know folks that whose voice would be valuable on this committee, I think the applications are, do you know where they're posted, Nikki?
I think on the city's website, on the city clerk's page.
Okay. All right. And then probably on that link that says more information here, you could find out where they're actually posted if you wanted to share that link with other people. So the other, we've talked a couple of times about the time of this meeting, and there are some folks who have conflicts with this time. We tried to figure out a time, and we're not very successful in doing that. Is it Um, it- We need to figure out a good way to get information from all of you about schedules that isn't us emailing, I guess, each other that in something that would, that would violate open meetings law. So I don't know if we have a good idea about how to get that done, but yeah, can we send out a meeting poll kind of thing and not get in trouble?
So really thinking about changing the date and time of this.
Date and time of this recurring meeting so that we can make sure that our council liaison is able to be here and not running off to other things, and that all of us are able to attend, and that the public is able to attend, so.
I will say, please, please, please don't base it on me.
Yeah.
Because my ideal situation, which is one that it's not available, would be this meeting time, but remotely. So I understand that remote isn't an option. So I had an opportunity to meet with you all, and I'm looking through my calendar. It was very difficult to find a day where I had 3 hours of availability. So please do not base it on me. I will say that for my schedule right now, Wednesdays and Fridays are not options. And then everything else becomes a preference. Like on Tuesdays for my council days, a lot of that time isn't available. And then the day before, because constituents are always reaching out on Mondays. So what works best for you, and I can fit in. I wish we could find a way to do some type of hybrid option, but I know that isn't available from a technological standpoint at this time.
I think we've been working on a hybrid version, haven't we, or said we would?
And I'm not sure how that would, I mean, we live stream now, but in terms of participation, I think that's the challenge.
Because you recall last time, well, one of the reasons I wasn't able to attend in person last time was because we had our council check-in that started towards the, but what I did was, quite frankly, I had both on the screen, and I was kind of going back and forth, and I was trying to. It is what it is. I'm used to that. So this isn't the only instance where between this and my day job that I find myself doing that. Like, I have a meeting after this, so when I get in the car, I'm going to call in. Then when I get back to my office, I'll be live on screen. So don't base it on me.
Okay, thank you.
It was just for the open seats, because a lot of times we kind of will help recruit for it. Do you want to go through, because generally when we have open seats, we kind of look at because our committee is supposed to have a certain makeup, and then usually we've had like nonprofit, small developers, big developers. I don't know if you want to kind of look at what our makeup is, like, and you can do that next meeting, but look at what the makeup's supposed to be so we can try to specifically target new, we're going to try to read.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can just say he's going to be leaving.
Yeah, so Barry rotates off and Dewana Little rotates off, so small developer, and someone working in community engagement, community development kinds of.
Francina, who we just heard from, would be maybe a good option. I could talk to her about that this afternoon.
Sometimes it takes a while to recruit, to do the recruiting and get everybody.
Sorry, who was you said Barry, and who was the other?
Dewana Little.
Dewana, okay.
From the YMI.
We'll have somebody to replace him.
It's hard, and well, then the requirement of having to live in the city complicates things, like, because for appointment, you have to live in the city. Once you're on, like Margie doesn't live in the city, I don't live in the city, it's like, once you're on, it changes, but for appointment, it's something that's looked at, you have to be a city resident. I don't think there's some committees have ways that will allow non-city residents, but currently AHAC doesn't unless there's not someone suitable who applies who's a city resident.
And what is the process now in terms of recruitment and appointment?
As far as I understand, it's all funneled through the city clerk's office. And so those vacancies are advertised on the city clerk's page that I'm showing here. And then those applications are given to city council, and then council takes action to make
I think in the past, we have reviewed applicants and made recommendations to council for members.
It goes to, yeah, the record, usually if the time cycles through, then we could help get community people to like submit applications. All the applications go to a central pool, and that all of the applications that are for a certain round and for the past year are all considered at once. And then they look at, a lot of times we'll review them, some people will make some kind of recommendation. The recommendation goes to boards and committee, like the boards and committee subcommittee. They then either recommend or override whatever our recommendations are, and then that goes to council.
I just saw this little note, council may appoint a non-city resident if there's some expertise or special skills, so that could be useful.
All right, well, if there's no further discussion on those two topics, I'll note the couple of events that are listed on the bottom, and we can move on to public comment. Was any public comment submitted in advance? Okay. Is there any public comment from our huge crowd of participants? More public. All right. Hearing none, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Hey.
Any opposed? Let's get out of here.